Hey guys, welcome back to my channel where I narrate Reddit stories while playing Minecraft. So let's start today's first story, which is a confession on Reddit of how he thinks his father is a serial killer. And enjoy Minecraft in background. I'm currently sitting in the back of a squad car, watching my childhood home get taped off with yellow plastic. And the only thing I can think about is the fact that I'm the one who sharpened the knife. Not because I'm a killer, but because, for 24 years, I believe my father was just a man who took his hobbies a little too seriously. Most people describe their dads as heroes or providers. Mine was a ghost who lived in the light. He was the guy who coached Little League, the guy who organized the neighborhood watch, and the guy who always had a clean shovel in the back of his truck. I always thought his hunting trips were just his way of dealing with the stress of being a single parent. But standing here now, feeling the cold vinyl of the police seat against my legs, I realized those trips were never about deer. It started with a smell. That metallic, cloying scent that hits you in the back of the throat. The kind of smell you can't quite scrub off your skin, no matter how hard you try. It was coming from the basement. Specifically from the corner behind the old water heater, the place he always told me never to touch. He said the foundation was weak there. Said I could get hurt if I played around it. I was home for the weekend from college, helping him move some old boxes because he said his back was acting up. He had gone to the hardware store for more packing tape, and that's when I saw it. A single, glinting piece of silver caught in the grout between the floor tiles. At first I thought it was a lost earring from my mother, a woman who disappeared when I was 3. A woman he always told me had simply walked out because she couldn't handle the pressure of motherhood. I pried the tile up with a screwdriver, expecting to find dirt, maybe an old pipe. But instead, I found a hollow space. And inside that space was a velvet bag. It wasn't just jewelry inside. It was a collection of driver's licenses, neatly organized by year, dating all the way back to the late 90s. My heart wasn't just racing. It felt like it was trying to punch its way out of my chest. I flipped through them, seeing faces of women I didn't recognize, until I reached the very bottom. And there it was, my mother's license. Her smiling face, looking back at me from 2005. But the most disturbing part wasn't the license itself. It was her eyes. They had been meticulously scratched out with something sharp. Then I heard the garage door groan open, his heavy boots hitting the concrete. And suddenly, I realized I didn't have time to put the tile back. I didn't have time to hide the evidence. As I looked down at the bag, it hit me all at once. I had spent my entire life being raised by the person who took her from me, and he was currently whistling a happy tune as he walked toward the basement door. The basement door creaked open. He stood at the top of the stairs, the kitchen light behind him, framing him like a dark halo. He didn't look angry. He didn't look scared. He just looked down at me, standing there with the bag of licenses in my hands. And then he said 3 words that still make my skin crawl. "Found it, did you?" He didn't move toward me at first. He just stayed there, leaning against the doorframe with that calm, paternal smile I'd trusted for my entire life. The basement felt like it was shrinking, the air growing thick with the scent of damp earth and old secrets. I wanted to scream. I wanted to bolt past him, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. "Sit down," he said. His voice was as smooth as a bedtime story. "I think it's time we had the talk I've been putting off for 20 years. I didn't sit. I backed away until my shoulders hit the cold concrete wall, clutching the bag of licenses like a shield. "Why?" I managed to choke out. "Why her? Why Mom?" He walked down the stairs slowly, one step at a time, the wood groaning under his weight. "Your mother was a beautiful person," he began. "But she was flawed. She wanted to leave. She wanted to take you away from me. She didn't understand that we were a unit, a team." He reached the bottom step and glanced at the bag in my hands. "Those women in that bag," he said quietly, "they weren't like her. They were just practice." A wave of nausea hit me so hard I thought I might collapse. Practice. He spoke about human lives the way someone talks about batting practice or learning to play the guitar. And as he stepped closer, I started noticing the little things I had ignored for years. The way he never had friends over. The way he always insisted on doing the laundry himself. The way he'd disappear for days, then come back looking refreshed, like he'd just had a long nap. "You think I'm a monster," he said, now only a few feet away. "But look at your life. Look at the house you grew up in, the college tuition I've been paying, the safety you felt every single night." He tilted his head slightly. "Who do you think provided that? The world is full of real monsters. I just happen to be the one who keeps them away from you." He reached out a hand, the same hand that used to ruffle my hair when I got an A on a test, the same hand that probably held the blade. "And you're not as innocent as you think," he whispered. "Remember when you were 10? The camping trip, where I asked you to help me dig that hole for the trash. You were so proud of how deep you made it. You worked so hard to help your old man." My stomach dropped. I remembered that trip. I remembered the heavy black bags he told me were just spoiled meat from the freezer. I remembered laughing as we tossed them in. I remembered him telling me I was a good son, a hard worker. I hadn't just been living with a killer. I had been his unwitting accomplice, his little helper. The guilt washed over me like acid, burning away every happy memory I had of us. "You won't call the police," he said. His eyes locked onto mine with terrifying certainty. "Because if I go down, I'm taking you with me. I've kept records, photos of us together on those trips, evidence that you knew exactly what we were doing, even if you've lied to yourself all these years." He stepped closer. His shadow stretched across the basement floor until it swallowed me whole. "We're the same, you and I. You have that same coldness in your heart. I've seen it when you look at people you don't like. I've seen the way you don't flinch at blood." He reached for the bag in my hands, and for a second, I almost gave it to him. I almost accepted that I was just like him. But then I saw the license at the top of the stack. A girl who couldn't have been more than 19. She had a gap between her front teeth and a messy ponytail. She looked like someone who had a life, a family, a future. And suddenly I understood something. The only reason I was safe was because I was an extension of his ego. I didn't give him the bag. I swung it at his face with everything I had. The stack of licenses turned the velvet bag into a blunt weapon. The corner of it caught him in the eye. He recoiled, swearing, clutching his face. And instead of running for the stairs, I ran deeper into the basement, toward the crawl space he had always warned me about. I knew I couldn't outrun him, but I knew the layout of this house better than anyone. I slipped into the narrow gap behind the furnace, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against the metal. For a moment, all I could hear was my own breathing. Then he stopped swearing. The basement went deathly silent. And a second later, I heard the unmistakable sound of a pocket knife clicking open. "I was going to wait until your graduation to tell you the rest," he called out. His voice echoed off the concrete walls. "But I think we should finish this tonight." A pause. Then his voice again, softer this time. "Don't you?" The silence in that basement was heavier than the darkness. I could hear my own pulse in my ears, a steady, rhythmic thumping that felt like a countdown. I was squeezed into a space so tight I could barely breathe. Dust coated my lungs, turning every shallow inhale into a struggle. I heard him moving, not rushing, not panicked. He was stalking the perimeter of the room, the same way he must have done 1,000 times in the woods. "I really hoped you'd be more mature about this," he whispered. His voice sounded like it was coming from everywhere at once. "I thought I raised you to be a pragmatist, to see the world for what it really is. A place where the strong survive by feeding on the weak." He kicked a pile of old newspapers. The sound echoed through the basement like a gunshot. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to imagine I was somewhere else, trying to remember the dad who made pancakes on Sunday mornings. But all I could see was the woman with her eyes scratched out. All I could think about was the meat we buried when I was 10. And suddenly I realized something. I wasn't just hiding from a killer. I was hiding from my own reflection. Then I felt something brush against my foot. Cold. Metal. I shifted slightly and realized what it was. The handle of the old wood axe we kept for the fireplace. It had been leaning against the furnace for years, forgotten, rusted. My fingers reached for it slowly, trembling as they wrapped around the rough wood. It felt heavy. "Final. I know where you are," he said. His voice came from right outside the furnace casing. "You always were a predictable hider. Remember when we played hide and seek when you were little? You always chose the smallest, darkest spots. You think they make you safe, but they just make you easy to corner." The furnace groaned as he leaned his weight against it. Then I heard the slow scrape of his knife against the metal casing, a screeching sound that made my teeth grind. I knew I had one chance. If I stayed there, he would simply wait me out. or reach in and end it. I had to become the thing he thought I was, the monster he claimed I was. I didn't wait for him to move. I kicked the thin metal panel of the furnace casing outward with both feet. The bang was deafening. It caught him completely off guard, knocking him back a step. I scrambled out of the crawl space, swinging the rusted axe in a wide, desperate arc. It didn't hit him, but it forced him to jump back, giving me just enough space to stand. Blood was running from his eye where I'd hit him with the bag, and for the first time in my life, his face twisted into something I had never seen before. Pure, unfiltered rage. "You're going to regret that," he hissed. His knuckles were white around the handle of the knife. "Why did you keep the licenses?" I shouted. Tears finally blurred my vision. "If you're so smart, if you're such a professional, why keep trophies?" He stopped, just for a second. A strange, haunting look crossed his face. "Because without them," he whispered slowly, "it's like it never happened. They're the only things that make me feel like I'm actually alive. Like I have power over something." Then he lunged, faster than I thought someone his age could move. I swung the axe again, but he slipped inside my reach before the blade could connect. We slammed into the concrete floor. The axe skittered away across the basement. His hands closed around my throat. His weight crushed the air out of my lungs. I looked into his eyes, the same eyes that had looked at me with pride for 24 years. And there was nothing there. No love, no regret, just the cold, calculating emptiness of a predator. My vision started going dark around the edges. My hands clawed at his wrists, trying to pry them loose. Then my fingers brushed against something hard in his pocket. His phone, the one he always kept locked, the one he said was for work. With the last bit of strength I had, I stopped fighting his grip. Instead, I reached into his pocket and yanked the phone out, then smashed it against the concrete floor as hard as I could. The screen shattered, but it triggered the emergency SOS feature, the one I had set up for him a year ago when I was worried about his heart. A loud, shrill alarm began to wail from the broken phone. Blue and red lights flashed from the cracked screen, flickering across the basement like a strobe. It distracted him, just for a second. In that second, I didn't hit him. I didn't grab the axe. I did something much worse. I looked him straight in the eyes and whispered, "Mom hated you." He froze. His grip loosened, just a fraction. And then I heard something else. Real sirens in the distance. The emergency call from the phone had gone through to the local precinct. I hadn't just saved myself. I had invited the world into his private graveyard. He realized it too. He looked toward the stairs, then back at me. And for the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of me, fear of the light. He didn't kill me. He stood up and ran for the back exit, the one that led to the woods he knew so well. But just before he reached the door, he stopped. He turned back. His eyes landed on the bag of licenses still lying on the floor. For a moment, he hesitated, torn between his trophies and his freedom. And that hesitation was enough. The basement door at the top of the stairs burst open. The room flooded with the light of a dozen flashlights. And I watched as my father, the neighborhood hero, was tackled to the ground by 3 police officers. He wasn't screaming for mercy. He was screaming at them to stay away from his floorboards. It's been 6 months since that night, and I haven't slept through the night once. I moved to a different state, changed my name, tried to bury the memory of that basement under a mountain of therapy and work, but some things don't stay buried, no matter how much dirt you throw on them. They found 15 bodies under the house, 15 women who had been missing for decades, including my mother. The police told me she hadn't suffered, but they say that to everyone, don't they? They found the meat we'd buried on that camping trip too. And for a while, there was a lot of talk about whether or not to charge me as an accomplice. I sat in interrogation rooms for weeks, explaining over and over again that I was just a kid, that I didn't know. But the lead detective, an older guy with tired eyes, he'd just look at me and ask the same question, "How did you not know?" And the truth is, I don't have an answer. Maybe I didn't want to know. Maybe the human brain is just really good at ignoring the rod if the surface looks pretty enough. My father is in a high-security facility now, awaiting a trial that will probably take years. He refuses to speak to anyone but me. He sends me letters every week, neatly written, polite letters asking about my day, asking if I'm taking care of my car, reminding me to change the oil every 3,000 miles. He writes like nothing has changed, like we're still just a dad and a son sharing a secret. I never open them. I put them in a shoebox in the back of my closet. I should burn them. I know I should. But every time I hold one, I feel that weight again. That pull toward the darkness he said we both shared. Last night, I found myself in the kitchen at 3 a.m., cleaning the grout of my new apartment's tiles with a toothbrush. I was scrubbing so hard my fingers were bleeding, and I realized I was listening. Listening for the sound of someone in the basement, listening for a whistling tune, listening for the silence that means someone is watching you. The most terrifying part of this isn't that my dad was a killer, it's the legacy he left behind. The way I look in the mirror and see his jawline, the way I catch myself being a little too calm in a crisis, the way I don't flinch when I see something violent on the news. He didn't just give me life, he gave me his perspective. I went to visit the site of the house last week. It's been demolished now, just a flat patch of dirt where my childhood used to be. The neighbors won't even walk their dogs past it. It's a dead spot in the middle of a suburb, a reminder that you never really know who is living next door. As I stood there, a little girl from the house across the street came outside to play. She was bouncing a ball, laughing, and her dad came out a moment later to join her. He looked like a normal guy, checked his watch, ruffled her hair, helped her with her jacket. And all I could think was, what's under his floorboards? What's in his hunting truck? What does he tell her when they go camping? I realized then that I'll never trust a smile again. I'll never believe in perfect families, and I'll never, ever stop looking for the tiles that don't quite fit. Because the monsters don't hide under your bed. They tuck you in, they pay your tuition, and they tell you they're proud of you, right before they show you how to dig the hole. I'm sitting in my apartment now, looking at that shoebox of letters, and I finally decided to open the most recent one. My hands are shaking as I rip the envelope. It's just one sentence, written in his perfect, precise handwriting. I left something for you in the storage unit, under the name we used for the deer meat. Don't let it go to waste. It's your inheritance. I don't know if I'm going to go there. I don't know if I can handle seeing what he thinks I deserve. But as I look at the rusted axe leaning against my own kitchen wall, I realize that some family traditions are impossible to break. Would you go? And that was the moment everything I thought I knew about my father collapsed. The man who raised me, the man the entire neighborhood trusted, turned out to be hiding a darkness that had been buried right beneath our feet the whole time. Sometimes the most terrifying monsters aren't the ones hiding in the shadows. They're the ones we grow up loving. And the worst part is, you don't always realize the truth until it's far too late. But not every nightmare involves secret basements and police sirens. Sometimes, the chaos in your life comes from the people who refuse to learn their lesson. Which brings me to the next story. This one is about a brother who keeps running back to the same toxic relationship, no matter how many times it destroys him. And the person who's finally reached the point where helping just isn't worth it anymore. My brother got back with his toxic ex, and honestly, I'm done saving him. I'm currently sitting in my car outside a cheap motel on the edge of town, watching my brother hand a thick envelope of my emergency rent money to the woman who has nearly ruined his life 3 times already. And the only thing keeping me from driving straight through the lobby is the fact that I've already called the police to report that car is stolen. Technically, it's in my name, and I'm done being the safety net for a man who refuses to learn how to walk. Most people say family is everything, but those people usually don't have a brother who steals their identity to pay for a toxic woman's spiritual retreat, or a brother who calls at 3 in the morning claiming he's been kidnapped, only for me to find him at a dive bar, spending my grocery money on her drinks. This started 2 weeks ago. He showed up at my door looking like he'd been dragged behind a bus. He told me she was gone for good this time, said she'd moved 2 states away, and blocked his number. And like a complete idiot, I believed him. I let him sleep on my couch. I bought him a new suit for interviews. I even let him drive my spare car, so he could get his life back on track. But then I started noticing the signs. The whispering phone calls out on the balcony. The way he suddenly tilted his phone screen away whenever I walked into the kitchen. And the smell of her perfume. That cheap, cloying vanilla scent, clinging to the upholstery of my car. I'm a researcher. I don't just notice things. I investigate them. So I checked the dashcam footage from the car. I expected to see him driving to job interviews, maybe the gym. Instead, I saw him picking her up from the bus station. I heard them laughing in the front seat about how easy I was to manipulate. And I heard her tell him that once they had enough of my money, they were going to disappear together. The betrayal didn't even hurt at first. It just felt like a cold, heavy weight settling in my stomach. I've spent 10 years being the good sibling, the responsible one, the one who fixes everyone's mistakes. But watching that grainy footage, I realized something. Being the good one just meant I was the most profitable target. So I didn't confront him. I didn't scream. I didn't throw his clothes out the window. Instead, I decided to play along for one more night. I told him I'd pulled some strings at work and gotten a bonus. I handed him an envelope and told him it was $5,000 for his new start. He hugged me. He actually had the nerve to look me in the eye and tell me I was his hero. Then he walked out the door with that envelope, headed straight for this motel. What he doesn't know is that the envelope isn't filled with cash. It's filled with photocopies of the dashcam transcripts. And that bonus I mentioned, it doesn't exist. I've already drained the joint account I foolishly shared with him. And I've already called the bank to report every single one of his recent purchases as fraudulent. Right now, I'm watching him through the motel window. He's handing her the envelope. He's smiling. He thinks he's won. But in about 5 minutes, those sirens in the distance are going to be for him. And I'm going to sit right here and watch the entire thing unfold. Because sometimes, the only way to save someone from a fire is to let them get burned. The police cruisers are pulling into the lot now, blocking the exits. Blue and red lights bounce off the cracked motel walls. He looks toward the parking lot. He sees the flashing lights. Then he sees me. And for the first time in my life, I don't feel guilty at all. The look on his face when the officers stepped out of their cars is something I'll never forget. It wasn't fear. It was confusion. He genuinely believed he was untouchable because I had always been there to bail him out. He kept looking from the cops to my car, trying to catch my eye, like he expected me to step out and explain that this was all some big misunderstanding. But I didn't move. I stayed behind the steering wheel, windows rolled up, watching him the way you'd watch a nature documentary. A predator, finally becoming the prey. And they didn't just arrest him for the car. I had already given them the dashcam footage, the part where he and his girlfriend discussed their plan for my money. Turns out, conspiracy to commit fraud is a much bigger problem than a stolen sedan. She didn't even wait for him to get handcuffed. The second she saw the uniforms, she dropped the envelope and bolted toward the back of the motel. No hesitation, no loyalty, no dramatic goodbye. She didn't care about him. She didn't care about their future. She was exactly what I'd always told him she was. A parasite looking for a host. And watching her get tackled into the dirt by an officer was the most satisfying thing I've seen in years. The next morning, the phone call started. Our parents, screaming, "How could you do this to your own flesh and blood? He's your brother," they said. "He's just lost. He's just in love." They didn't care that he'd stolen from me. They didn't care that he'd been mocking me behind my back. In their story, the person who calls the police is always the villain. But I was done being the villain in their story and the victim in his. I spent the entire day at the bank, closing every connection I had to him. I changed my phone number, installed a security camera on my front door, and I started looking into selling my house. Because I realized something. As long as I lived in the same city, I was just a permanent withdrawal slip for his bad decisions. About a week later, I got a letter from the jail. It was from him. For a moment, I thought it might be an apology. Maybe he'd finally seen the light. Maybe he'd realized what he'd done. But when I opened the envelope, it was just more of the same. "You've always been jealous of me," he wrote. "You've always hated that I found someone who actually loves me. And you're just using this to control me." The lack of self-awareness was almost impressive. He was sitting in a jail cell because of a woman who abandoned him in 10 seconds flat. And somehow, he was still blaming me. That's when it finally clicked. He wasn't just toxic because of her. He was broken long before she showed up. And no amount of help from me was ever going to fix that. So I decided to go see him. Not to bail him out, not to argue. I just wanted to know if there was even a shred of the brother I grew up with left inside him. When I sat down across from him at the glass, he didn't look ashamed. He looked smug. "I know you're going to drop the charges," he said through the phone. His voice sounded tinny and distant. "You always do. You can't handle mom and dad being mad at you. So let's just skip the lecture and get the paperwork started." I looked at him, the way he leaned back in the chair, like he was on vacation instead of wearing a jail jumpsuit. And in that moment, I realized something uncomfortable. I had helped create this monster. By always being the good one, I had taught him there were never any consequences. "I'm not dropping anything," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "In fact, I've already spoken to the DA. I'm testifying as the primary witness." The smugness vanished instantly. His face drained of color. "You wouldn't," he whispered. "You're my brother." "No," I said, standing up and hanging the phone back on the hook. "I was your bank." A small pause. "And the bank is closed." As I walked out of that visiting room, I could hear him screaming my name, pounding on the glass until the guards had to restrain him. And when I stepped outside into the sunlight, I felt lighter than I had in years. Like a weight I'd been carrying since childhood had finally been lifted. But the story wasn't over yet, because she was still out there. And she didn't seem like the kind of person who lets a $5,000 grudge go easily. It had been a month since the arrest, and the dust had finally started to settle. Or at least I thought it had. I'd moved into a high-rise with coded entry and a doorman. For the first time in weeks, I was sleeping through the night without checking my bank alerts every 10 minutes. But then, at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday, my doorbell camera sent a notification to my phone. I didn't even have to look at the screen to know who it was. Somehow, I could almost smell that cheap vanilla perfume through the digital connection. Still, I opened the app, and there she was, standing in the hallway outside my apartment. But she looked completely different than she had at the motel. She was wearing a professional suit. Her hair was perfectly styled. She looked normal. "I know you're watching," she said, staring directly into the camera lens. "And I'm not here to fight. I'm here to give you something." I didn't open the door. Instead, I pressed the intercom. "Leave," I said. My voice came out cold and flat. "Or the police will be here in 3 minutes." "Your brother isn't the only one who keeps records," she replied calmly. She ignored my warning completely. Then she held something up to the camera, a small, silver flash drive. "He's been recording your conversations for years. Every time you talked about your taxes, every time you mentioned your creative accounting for your side business. He was building a file on you. He wasn't just planning to disappear with your money. He was planning to make sure you could never come after him." My heart stopped. I knew exactly what she was talking about. 2 years earlier, when my business was barely staying afloat, I'd made a few decisions that weren't exactly by the book. Nothing massive, but enough to ruin my career if the wrong person got their hands on it. And I had told him, because I trusted him, because I believed he was the one person who wouldn't judge me. "He was going to use this as insurance," she continued. She leaned closer to the camera. "But I have it now, and I'm willing to give it to you." A pause. "For a price." "How do I know you're not lying?" I asked. My hands were shaking as I gripped the phone. Instead of answering, she plugged the drive into her phone. Then she played a recording, and there it was. My own voice, clear as day, describing the exact bank accounts I'd used to move the funds. My brother hadn't just been a screw-up. He'd been a predator in training, waiting for the exact moment I finally snapped, so he could destroy my life. "What do you want?" I asked quietly. "I want the charges dropped," she said. "Not for him. For me. The DA is trying to link me to a string of fraud cases he committed. You testify that I was a victim too, that he coerced me, and this drive disappears." I slid down against the wall, sitting on the floor, staring at the phone. The irony was almost poetic. To save my reputation, I would have to become the person I hated. I would have to lie in court and protect the woman who helped destroy my brother. But then I remembered something he used to say all the time. "You're too predictable. You always follow the rules." And suddenly, I realized something. They both believed I was still playing the same game. "Fine," I said into the intercom. "Slide the drive under the door. I'll call my lawyer in the morning." She smiled. A thin, sharp, predatory smile. Then she slid the silver drive under the crack of the door and walked away, completely confident she had won, completely convinced I was just another good guy she had broken. I picked up the drive, but I didn't plug it into my computer. I didn't even check the files. Instead, I walked into the kitchen, opened the drawer, and grabbed a hammer. Then I smashed the drive again and again until it shattered into pieces. After that, I sat down at my table and finally did something I should have done years ago. I called my lawyer, but I didn't ask him to drop the charges. I told him I needed to make a voluntary disclosure to the IRS. I told him I was willing to pay the fines, willing to lose my license, willing to take whatever consequences came with it, because I realized something. The only reason their insurance worked was because I was afraid of the truth. And the moment I stopped being afraid, they had nothing left to control. I wasn't protecting myself anymore. I wasn't protecting them either. I was just done. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. I was just tired. The fallout was as bad as I expected, but not in the way I feared. The creative accounting cost me my professional certification and a massive chunk of my savings in back taxes and penalties. My parents stopped speaking to me entirely when they found out I had ruined the family reputation by being honest about my own mistakes. But the look on her face in the courtroom when I took the stand, that alone was worth every cent. She had been so sure I would crumble, so sure I would protect my perfect life at any cost. But the moment I sat there and admitted my own faults, it took all the power out of her threat. Without my fear, she had nothing. My brother got 5 years. She got 3 as an accessory. And it turns out she had a much longer record than anyone realized. Once the police started digging, her whole victim act didn't hold up for more than 5 minutes. I'm living in a much smaller apartment now. I take the bus to work at a job that pays half of what I used to make. But for the first time in 30 years, I don't feel a weight on my chest. I don't wake up at 3 in the morning checking my phone. And I don't lie awake wondering if the person I love is secretly planning my downfall. I got one last letter from my brother about a week ago. He's still exactly the same. "You think you're so much better than me," he wrote. "But you're the one living in a dump, while I'm getting 3 meals a day on the state's dime. You lost everything just to prove a point." I didn't write back, but if I had, I would have told him something simple. I didn't lose everything. I traded a life built on lies for a life built on nothing but the truth. And nothing is a lot easier to carry than a house full of secrets. Sometimes I see photos of our parents on social media, holiday dinners, family gatherings. They always leave an empty chair for their lost son. They never mention me at all. It used to hurt, but now I understand it. They would rather love a beautiful lie than face a difficult truth. And I'm okay being the difficult truth. I still have that vanilla-scented air freshener I took out of my old car. It's sitting in the trash can in my hallway. Every once in a while, I catch a faint whiff of it, and it reminds me of the motel, the sirens, and the exact moment I stopped being the safety net. People sometimes ask me if I'll ever forgive him, and the answer is no. Not because I'm angry, but because forgiveness would mean I want him back in my life. And I don't. I wish him well. I hope he finds whatever it is he's looking for, but I hope he finds it very far away from me, because I'm finally learning how to walk on my own. And it turns out, the ground is a lot more stable when you're not waiting for someone to pull it out from under you. So I guess the real question is, would you have taken the deal? And those were today's stories. 2 very different situations, but both with the same uncomfortable lesson. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones we spent years trying to protect. A father hiding monsters beneath the floorboards. A brother who turned family loyalty into a personal bank account. And in both cases, the hardest decision wasn't fighting them. It was finally deciding to stop saving them. Because walking away from someone you love can feel cruel. But sometimes, it's the only way to save yourself. So now I'm curious what you think. Would you have handled either of these situations differently? And more importantly, would you have taken the deal? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to stick around. There are plenty more strange, messy, and unbelievable stories coming your way.